Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday. You made it all the way to Friday, all the way to another chaos weekend. Getting ready for another one of those. Friday, June 27th, 2025. And, man, I don't know where to start. There's much happening, and I'm trying to keep on top of it. I'm just sort of, I'm watching the social media kind of explode in, not one big story in particular, but there's several things that have flown by in the morning that I've been trying to keep up with and decide on, whether or not these things are going to make for Good Friday fodder or not, but not we don't have to wait for Good Friday for them. But, one of the more annoying features of getting your news this way via social media is if you look away for a second, and then go back and try and capture that story that you saw fly by a minute ago. Well, now there's 800 things in the way. So we'll just have to, we'll have to wing it. And there should be plenty in Pocket as it is that we can use. And remember, Pocket is coming to an end. I have to remember that myself and go and collect all of my stories and save all of the things I saved and find a new alternative. And I've also noticed that I think the Pocket button on Mozilla Firefox browser that I use from a million years ago is gone. And I had to actually sort of manually add links to Pocket. It makes some sense. They're shutting down. They're going to stop accepting new links in a couple of days, I think, at the end of next week, perhaps, maybe a week after that. So I guess they might as well just start slowing down the flow now. Anyway, so let's see. Early this morning, any number of things. What would you like to talk about? I found out that there's a story that I've missed entirely. We could begin with that. The number of things that are happening. Some of which, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess you can't say anything is a distraction anymore, right? Actually, that's something that Scott sent to me. Maybe that's the place setter for this morning. Did I pocket that? I think I didn't because there was no button for me to pocket it in, but he sent me a story, it's a joke. It's from McSweeney's, so a good joke. But was I able to pocket this thing? I got to jump back and find out. I think maybe, there we are. If you scroll down long enough, that's what kind of an active pocketing day it's been. But McSweeney's, just for 3 minutes, let's say, although that's, rarely how long it takes me to read anything. Just McSweeney's Harry Valentine, or someone who's established a relationship of some kind with McSweeney's, named Harry Valentine. I don't know what the relationship is. I'm not trying to comment on that. I'm trying to read the article. Lex Luthor's latest evil plan is just a distraction from his many villainous schemes. I think maybe all you need is the headline on that one, but I bet it's a funny story. Well, he finally did it. Controversial business magnate. That's pretty good. Lex Luthor. That's worth it all along. Controversial business magnate. Oh, boy. Has surrounded Earth with LexCorp satellites. Wait a minute. We really have that. Targeting their lethal laser beams, and we may have that, at every head of state in the world. Unless Superman reveals his secret identity by midnight, that's an obsession for you. Luthor will assassinate presidents and prime ministers one by one. The world watches the clock in fear, questioning whether Superman will save us, terrified of who will be first. In the face of this threat to worldwide order, I am here to tell you this. Do not worry about it. It is just a distraction. It is fine. Consider the timing. This is very similar to reading the regular news. Isn't it all a little convenient that he just happened to hatch a dastardly plot 1 week after a nefarious scheme? This is also a good exercise in dancing around the problems and using different wording for it. It was only last week when Lex Luthor set his killer robot squad loose on the streets of Metropolis under the guise of autonomous trash collectors. Oh, I see where you're going, sir. In the ensuing chaos, he lost support among his own board of directors at LexCorp. Now, to change the narrative, and keep his job leading the missile and poison company that bears his name. He has cooked up this silly satellite business. We must keep the pressure on Luthor by ignoring this latest global threat and calling it out for what it really is, an attempt to save face by a vulnerable billionaire. Lex Luthor is doing the evil thing I care less about as a distraction from the evil thing I care more about. While it seems like ages ago, in today's fast-paced news environment, it was just last month that Luthor was caught pouring powdered kryptonite into the Metropolis Reservoir. While many saw his raised fists and maniacal laughter on the reservoir's edge as evidence of ill intent, I saw the truth. It, too, was a distraction, right? It wasn't a Nazi salute. Oh, boy. I'm sorry that this guy's going to get killed by Elon Musk. Anyone worried about the space rocks in the drinking water is letting Lex Luthor set the terms of the conversation. Some would say there are no distractions. They believe that the more obvious pattern is that Lex Luthor simply enjoys doing villainous things, that he will continue to do villainous things every day, multiple times a day, as long as he can. Maybe switching topics here. The hardened skeptics point out the well-reported fact that Luthor wakes up every morning by shouting, "Curse you, Superman!" from his penthouse lair. Who has one of those? They share the story that every Metropolis resident has of the first time Lex Luthor commanded them to be gone. They remind us that Luthor's graduate thesis was how to be a bad guy. Yes, Luthor's history of villainous behavior is widely known, but what if it's all a ruse? The whole thing, I guess. On a recently resurfaced episode of LexCorp's podcast, Evildoer, his longtime assistant and henchman, Otis Berg, outlined the company's do a lot of evil strategy. Basically what we do, Berg said, is a lot of evil stuff. That makes it hard for the Daily Planet to focus on each evil thing, which allows us to do more evil things, which is ultimately the goal. So there you have it. Lex Luthor is only doing all these evil things so that at the end of the day he can do more evil things. Like him or not, you have to respect it as a brilliant media strategy. Once you see the pattern, it's obvious. The reservoir debacle was to distract from an earlier scandal when Luthor exploded a skyscraper with his war suit, which he only did to distract from a fiasco, like when Luthor exploded a mountain with the Legion of Doom, which he only did to distract from the controversy when Luthor exploded the sun. We must never let Lex Luthor force us to take our eyes off the ball just because he threw another, technically more consequential ball. The most important thing for Metropolis residents like us, more than protesting this latest offense, pardon me for giving you the wrong emphasis, is to pick one thing to be mad about. And the second most important thing to do is to make sure that the thing we are mad about is not the current thing happening. The third most important thing, I guess, would be doing something. Does anyone know Superman? Okay. All right. Well done. And sets the tone for the day, I guess. It's going to be difficult to figure out which distractions you should be ignoring as distractions and which distractions you should be pointing out are actually just distractions from other distractions. So ignore it. Read the news that interests you. Talk about it all. If you can't get it all in, tune in the show. We can't get it all in there either, but we can at least have fun trying. All right. A story I had no idea even existed until 2 minutes before the show. Amanda Marcotte always knows these stories somehow, and I feel bad that anybody has to know this story. I saw a Blue Sky post about it, and it had information in it that wasn't in the headline, but it's in the subheader here. The headline doesn't tell me what's going on. If you had showed me that headline, this is a good job on your social media strategy, Amanda. If you had showed me that headline or allowed the Salon.com bot to tweet the thing out just with the headline, I don't know what the policy is, I would have passed. Joe Rogan beef shows MAGA male fragility. Ordinarily, that's a headline. Okay, Joe Rogan beef, big whoop. Male fragility, it's interesting. But I probably won't be interested in this, and I probably won't care by the end. And then, here's what turned it around. By Amanda Marcotte. Okay, well, there's probably more to it than just pointing out that there's male fragility. Okay, right? That's something I knew about and understand, and I can relate to why that's in a Joe Rogan headline. But I feel like there will be something more because Amanda Marcotte wrote it. And indeed, in case there isn't, can't win them all, the subheader does the job. The arrest and meltdown of the, quote, liver king shows how far-right masculinity hurts its disciples. And so what was going on here for me, I really, now I want to go and find Amanda's post about it on Blue Sky, because that had something to do with catching my eye with it. And here we are. This is, well, I don't know. She's done a couple of them with a couple of pull quotes from the story, and I don't know which one I saw necessarily. But the Liver King's arrest after threatening Joe Rogan isn't just a news of the weird story, and right, there's more. But I was like, here's the issue for me. I was like, the Who King now? What? I don't know. I don't know who that is. Is this somebody with a Netflix series like the Tiger guy, or that's an HBO one? I don't know. I think it was that Netflix. I sometimes miss those things. I don't have any idea who this guy is, but it's a funny sounding name. So, okay, Amanda, tell me the story and teach me the lesson. That's what's great about reading her stuff. The arrest and meltdown of the Liver King shows how far-right masculinity hurts its disciples. Yes, okay. A sure sign that we live in a sci-fi dystopia, I would say that's about right, is the way social media both rewards and encourages mental illness. This is interesting. And now it makes me think of the piece that I read during the taped show Absence a week or so ago about AI hallucinations, not AI making up facts per se, or like citations, but reinforcing what were essentially psychotic delusions that people chose to chat with a chatbot about and making things worse. That's interesting. Anyway, a sure sign we live in this sci-fi dystopia is the way social media both rewards and encourages mental illness. With the necessary caveat that I am not a psychologist and cannot diagnose people, I must note that common sense alone revealed that not everything was okay with Brian Johnson, a MAGA-aligned manfluencer. He built an enormous online fan base of nearly 3 million Instagram followers by developing a muscle man physique so exaggerated, it cannot help but call into question both his mental and physical health. Okay. We've seen such things before. One guy wrote it to international film stardom and the governorship of California at one point. And then his whole family left him and he lives with llamas. But he seems cooler now. Anyway, on June 23rd, Johnson is still in the pumped up a-hole stage and, may stay there forever. Arnold was a unique figure, let's say. Johnson, though, shared a bizarre Instagram reel on June 23rd, so just a couple of days ago, that Amanda Marcotte, I'm not Amanda Marcotte, but that's the way she wrote it, had the displeasure of watching, well, for the sake of journalism. Shirtless, of course, and crowned with what appears to be a wolf's head taxidermy hat. He issues some sort of challenge while holding what looks like a gold-plated gun. Are they toys? In each hand. Man to man, I'm picking a fight with you, he says. You should dismantle me. Then, after he talks himself out, he gyrates to the music, waving his veiny arms in the air. For those who might unfortunately view that video and wonder what the hell he's talking about, let me elucidate. Now tell me a little bit about Liver King. What's that supposed to be? Johnson is trying to get podcaster Joe Rogan to fight him. That I understood. The origin of this beef is unsurprisingly very dumb. Johnson built his audience with implausible claims that he built his body through workouts and an ancestral diet, which he erroneously says is mostly meat, especially organ meat. Okay, so much for the liver. I get it now. Rogan, despite being open to every other idiotic idea under the sun, has dismissed Johnson's claims as preposterous and insisted Johnson is using steroids or human growth hormone, which I guess if you eat organ meats from the wrong, cattle stand, I guess you could be getting too many growth hormones. Johnson confessed to as much, by the way, in 2022. And according to a recent Netflix documentary about him, I knew there had to be one in there, it seriously damaged what had been a $100 million a year supplement business. Oh, okay. Was it full of steroids? Or people just were like, well, your supplements aren't doing this. It's the steroids that are doing it. And won't steroids damage your liver, among other things? Anyway, it's unclear what precipitated the barrage of social media threats from Johnson to Rogan in recent days, though I'm inclined to think Johnson's efforts to promote the Netflix show are a likely factor. Okay. So here's what's happening, I guess, if I understand this yet. I don't know. Why am I claiming to understand this at this point? I don't know. Johnson's got a weirdo Netflix show, and I guess as a method of promotion of the show, he's trying to let people know like that he exists and who he is. And he's like, I know, here, why don't I pick a fight with a media star and see if that helps? All right. Well, at any rate, what is clear is that Johnson seems unhinged, and because he drove to Austin, Texas with apparent designs to confront Rogan in person, genuinely dangerous. Austin police certainly seem to think so, which is why they arrested Johnson on Tuesday and charged him with terroristic threats. A weird story, but one that shouldn't be dismissed as marginal or inconsequential. Now, I was willing to do that a minute ago, but then I saw she had something to say about it. On the contrary, the ongoing saga of the podcast bro versus the liver king illustrates a deeper truth about the fragile masculinity that undergirds the MAGA movement. Rogan may not think he's a clown like Johnson, but, well, that's interesting. Are we saying Johnson thinks he's a clown? That could really be true. But Rogan certainly doesn't think he's the same type of clown that Johnson is, and that's almost certainly what he believes. Okay, Johnson may also believe he's a clown and doing this on purpose, but both built their careers by playing to male insecurities and the ever-elusive fantasy of true manhood. Johnson's breakdown also exposes a real danger in chasing this dream, which is that it can drive a man crazy. Rogan reportedly told police he believes Johnson is significantly unstable and has a significant drug issue, all of which feels fair, especially since Rogan is the target of Johnson's inchoate ire. But in a narrative of masculinity that Rogan himself peddles, Johnson's behavior makes a sick sort of sense. His honor, quote unquote honor, was threatened by Rogan. A humiliation, which is coming back up again in the wake of the Netflix documentary and a new round of stories about how Johnson used drugs to build his body. Oh, he doesn't have... I see. It's not a show about him that he that he wants people to see, but he is thinking, oh, any publicity is good publicity, and maybe he can ride that as an expose documentary. I don't know. Anyway, so it's coming back up again in the wake of the Netflix documentary and a new round of stories about how Johnson used drugs to build his body. In this right-leaning form of masculinity, the way to rectify this alleged insult, even if one knows it's true, is to challenge your critic to a fight. It's the might makes right mentality distilled. I guess so. Rogan's massive fortune is built on the same foundation. He sells himself to a largely male audience as a role model of machismo, highlighting his history as a college dropout who eschewed the effeminate world of learning to be a martial arts fighter and an ultimate fighting championship promoter. On his show, he fetishizes weightlifting, fighting sports, and other cliches of hypermasculinity, and like Johnson, capitalizes on his audience's insecurities by selling them useless supplements with false promises that they can, quote, biohack their way to domineering manhood. Crucially, both Johnson and Rogan neatly illustrate the paradox of this form of masculinity, one that claims to be strong, but is actually quite fragile and easily threatened. Johnson is so cowed by accusations of fraud that he appears to have gone directly off the deep end. Rogan's elaborate supplement regimen betrays a fear that he cannot achieve manhood on his own. He needs to treat his body like a chemistry experiment to get there. Worse, he projects his fears of emasculation outward, lashing out regularly at trans people who destabilize the gender binary he's so invested in, and women, mocking the very notion that they are the equal of men. Psychologists call this paradox precarious manhood. In an influential 2012 paper for Psychology of Men and Masculinity. Why isn't there a psychology of... Oh, wait, there is a Psychology of Men and Masculinity. Okay, this is it. Psychology professors Joseph Vandello and Jennifer Bosson, maybe bosun, I don't know, Bosson, defined it as hard won and easily lost, writing, the precarious manhood thesis has 3 basic tenets. Are you ready for all of them? First, manhood is widely viewed as elusive, achieved status, or one that must be earned, in contrast to womanhood, which is ascribed or assigned status. Oh, that's an interesting comparison. Second, once achieved, manhood, and you can get it by buying a Bushmaster XR15, right? Man card reissued. Once achieved, manhood status is tenuous and impermanent. You might run out of ammunition, for instance. That is, it can be lost or taken away. Third, manhood is confirmed primarily by others and thus requires public demonstrations of proof. And that's when you're supposed to hit bring the mallet down and ring the bell at the carnival. That's traditionally how it's done. And you eat a can of spinach and then you flex and show your battleship tattoos. In other words, men are allegedly the stronger sex, but their status is forever ephemeral. One small slip-up, a bright pink shirt, a girlish scream, a same-sex sexual encounter, and your manhood can be stripped away, perhaps permanently, leaving men who buy into this system in a constant state of anxiety, which ironically makes them seem fragile and paranoid. It's like as if your status in the world was Bitcoin. 1 minute you're up, and the next minute it all disappears. Okay. Maybe that's weird that they're involved in both. This is the standard form of masculinity in the MAGA world. Donald Trump epitomizes it, of course. And wealth probably really needs to be factored in there, too. Like, that's how they define success. And to be a big, tough, manly man, you got to be successful. And that means having lots of money, mostly for the purpose of buying the things that you think will make women like you, which is also a little bit weird, and maybe there could be another thing in your life. Besides that, I don't know, you could mate and read a book. What about that? Anyway, this is a standard form of masculinity in the MAGA world. The books are out. Donald Trump epitomizes it, of course. He's forever bragging about how strong and tough and perfect he is, but he's also forever whining, accusing everyone else of trying to undermine, cheat, or demean him for no legitimate reason. He wants people to believe he's all man, but he views his manhood as something that everyone wants to steal from him just for the hell of it. Trump's followers never notice because they live in the same world, where real manhood is both essential and impossible. The rise of authoritarianism is always intertwined with precarious masculinity. It contains the very same paradox. And again, I'd say if there were any need for justification for this discussion, that's an important thing to understand. Toxic masculinity and precarious masculinity. Okay, very interesting gender studies stuff too. Well, it's now your government, so it might be worth paying some attention to. Authoritarians claim to be strong, but in reality they are so weak they cannot withstand dissent or diversity. They crave control because freedom scares them. The Liver King's collapse is a tragedy on the individual scale, but there's a sliver of hope for the rest of us here. The more men burrow into these reactionary fantasies about manhood peddled by MAGA, the harder it is to manage the paradox of precarious masculinity. The contradictions start to undermine their power. And I should make a note to myself here, but my pencil is missing. So second note to myself, get pencil. But how can I make this note? So I will mentally make this note, and I'll make this note out loud. A minute ago, we were just reading about authoritarians being so weak they can't withstand dissent or diversity, and we know all about what they've been panicking about with diversity and how the things they've been doing in pursuit of it. And there's a new chapter in the Trump attack on academia that has something to do with that locally. I guess it would be a local story for me. One, a new round of attacks on the president of the University of Virginia and accusations against him by the Justice Department, which is that's doing a lot of work. If you just leave it at that, I mean, it's true that the current incarnation of the Justice Department has made these accusations, but they're not the usual kind of accusations that a Justice Department makes. They're unfounded and stupid and weird and ideological. In other words, they're accusing him of, oh my God, of DEI, which, as you know, is call for dramatic music and federal charges now. There's an involved story that goes along with it, but there's a local angle on it too, involving the Loudoun County school board supervisor, not the supervisor, the superintendent of schools here. And, we went through a whole round of nonsense with the Loudoun County School Board becoming a national hot button issue. Chris Rufo believed he built a career for himself, and he did. But as I told you the whole time, Loudoun County really didn't want anything to do with it, and they still don't. Let's see if I can mentally get myself back to that place after the break and after finishing Amanda's article. Let's see. Can I even finish the article here? The contradictions, right. The more men burrow into these reactionary fantasies about manhood peddled by MAGA, the harder it is to manage the paradox of precarious masculinity. The contradictions start to undermine their power. Trump is only a few months into his second term, and his inability to navigate the conflict is already hurting him politically. His efforts to look, quote, tough with mass deportations and bombing Iran mostly serve as evidence of how he doesn't know what he's doing, or as he might say, doesn't know what the he's doing. Right? Okay. His claims that he can use tariffs to force amazing trade deals, among other things, have blown up in his face. Not literally, though. Unsurprisingly, his approval ratings, which he doubtless sees as tied to his masculine power, dropped quickly. For those who wish to hear it, there's a lesson in this. The only way to win is to get off the hamster wheel of precarious masculinity. Stop trying to be a real man and just be a person. Instead of being so afraid of trans people, look to their fundamental revelation that your gender is what you make of it, not something you have to prove to others. I'll tell you one more sentence after this.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. My babbling got in the way of everything, and I missed the big wind-up and payoff pitch for Amanda's article. There really was just one sentence left, and if only this was one of those pre-recorded days where we didn't have the breaks to deal with, I would have delivered it right then and there. But just to reiterate and set the tone for it, the final paragraph. For those who wish to hear it, there is a lesson in all of this. The only way to win in the rat race of toxic masculinity, essentially, is to get off the hamster wheel of precarious masculinity. Stop trying to be a real man and just be a person. And I think we get that. We get it here. It's the rest. All right. Instead of being so afraid of trans people, look to their fundamental revelation that your gender is what you make of it, not something you have to prove to others. The Liver King. The Liver King is what happens when the ethos of MAGA masculinity reaches its logical conclusion. All muscle, but no strength. It's crazy. I don't even, and then I saw a picture eventually. I was like, all right, well, who is this dude, the Liver King? And, well, is as dumb as it looked, or dumb as it sounded, as it turns out. Okay, I guess I can try and find out what the Netflix documentary is about, but it's very difficult to make myself care about this. But if anybody could do it, Amanda Marcotte, and it worked. So, okay. Other stories that this could lead us to consider. Are any of these parked? I think this is where I first started to discover the lack of the pocket button. So I went and looked up over the break some articles that will help us understand the references I made earlier. Now, I got the New York Times on it, and they're important and all that stuff. But I also have the Daily Progress, which would be the local-ish paper. I guess, I mean, is it based in Charlottesville, the Daily Progress? But it's local to UVA, certainly. The New York Times, though, had a certain phrasing of the issue that was worth considering. But let's start with well, I don't know. Maybe then we'll start with the New York Times version of it and maybe skim let's see how long the Daily Progress version of this actually is. And whether they in fact wrote their own original piece or just ended up running a wire piece on it, which would really be a shame. Now, okay, they've got an original piece on it. Let's see. Well, let's start instead with the Daily Progress. We're going to reverse that decision and start with DOJ officials call for UVA President Jim Ryan to resign. Officials at the U.S. Department of Justice are calling on UVA President Jim Ryan to resign, claiming he has misrepresented efforts to dismantle DEI at the school. Here I want to compare headlines and subheaders. The New York Times version of it is Trump Justice Department pressuring University of Virginia president to resign. Subheader, the Justice Department has demanded that James E. Ryan step down to help resolve a civil rights investigation into the school, 3 people familiar with the matter said. Now, the way this first came to my attention was people posting about it on social media and saying, these headlines leave a lot to be desired, right? They draw you in with the, UVA, DOJ investigation. Oh, a civil rights investigation into the school. He should step down. Normally, like all of our priors about understanding how the federal government works and the things that they do in a normal situation make us, if we walked away at this point, we'd be saying, all right, I got to get back to this and read this later on because apparently, let's see, Virginia, okay, South, it's not deep South, but, it was the capital of the Confederacy. So UVA president needs to step down. The DOJ says he has to step down because there's a problem with a civil rights investigation into the school. Wow, that's crazy. I would have thought things had changed by now, but apparently down at UVA, you got white supremacist racists blocking access to education for black students and other minorities, or maybe they want to exclude Jews from the. What's happening here? Why is there a federal civil rights investigation into UVA? And the answer and the big problem with all of this is no. Once again, all of these words are doing all this heavy lifting with the shadows of the past. But what's happening here is the Trump administration and the Trump DOJ is using the cloaking of, having been given the keys to the Justice Department building, and now they can go in there and say things like, I'm the Attorney General, or I'm the Deputy Attorney General, and I'm going to launch an investigation into you. And it turns out that the investigation and the civil rights claim is the opposite of everything you would ordinarily have assumed there was a civil rights claim about. This is a claim that it's a civil rights violation for the president of UVA to do all he can to help promote diversity and inclusion at UVA and make it more accessible to minority students, more accessible to whatever, any sort of traditionally excluded members of the student body, with outreach programs, bringing them in to and offering, making sure that they can get every opportunity out of this educational system that more privileged students have traditionally gotten. Oh, you mean upholding all of the values of the civil rights movement and of civil rights law in this country? Yes. And so you're investigating him about why he's not doing more? No, we're investigating that he's doing it at all because our new claim is that it is a federal crime to be doing the things that he's doing, trying to help people. Oh, I see. That's actually a much different and much larger story and warrants some investigation. So now we'll go back to the local coverage. Caroline King is the author of the piece in the Daily Progress down in Virginia. And here's her telling of the story. In an unprecedented move, and I think that begins well, the U.S. Department of Justice officials are calling on University of Virginia President Jim Ryan to resign, saying he has essentially been a hero. They're saying that what you and I would say. He's actually doing a great thing, standing up for diversity. Why is he now under criminal investigation or civil rights violations, etc.? I don't know whether it's criminal in nature. Probably not yet. But I think that's probably the threat that they're going to in order to get him to resign. But they're saying he has slow-walked the removal of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at the school and misrepresented the steps UVA has taken to end them. Because they haven't. Because they're smart and they know what they're doing and they have integrity. And it's the DOJ and the Trump administration who think they're onto something here, but are not. DOJ officials have asked Ryan to step down on multiple occasions, as first reported by the New York Times on Thursday. So that's why I guess we began with the New York Times in my mind yesterday. But we'll go in reverse chronological order then. All right. So, by the way, one more point here. The federal government asking the president of the University of Virginia to resign, asking and then saying, we're going to force it eventually. And by the way, states' rights, blah, blah, blah. There you go. The DOJ did not immediately respond to a Daily Progress request for confirmation. The demand to remove Mr. Ryan was made over the past month on several occasions by Gregory Brown, the Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, believe it or not, to university officials and representatives, according to 3 people briefed on the matter, the paper reported on Thursday evening. Now, I guess if they don't cover all the details that I remember from skimming the New York Times article, we'll go there too. But there are some remarkable notes about Gregory Brown and Harmeet Dillon as well, who is involved in this as a civil rights official, well, an anti-civil rights division official at the DOJ, and I'm sure they'll get around to telling us about it. Brown, the guy who is Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, and says that Ryan must step down. Brown is a UVA alum who also happens to be a partner at the Charlottesville law firm of Brown, that's his name, and Gavalier, maybe? Is that this is very Frenchy looking. Does he say Gavalier? Gavalier, which has taken UVA to court on multiple occasions. Most recently, over a Jewish Israeli student who claimed he was the target of virulent anti-Semitic attacks while on grounds, that's how they say on campus there at UVA, on grounds, like capital G grounds, and a white alumna who faced expulsion after she was accused of mocking a Black Women Matter protest, an allegation the university's own investigations decided lacked corroborating evidence. So they investigated on the university side, and they said, not enough evidence, and didn't expel her. But she sued anyway, and she found a willing representative in Brown and Gavalier over there. Anyway, both cases were settled out of court. The settlements were never disclosed to the public, and we move on. But it's an interesting thing. So Brown, what's his first name again? Gregory Brown, UVA alum, and Harmeet Dillon also likewise, you'll find out, a UVA alum. And it's just interesting that they availed themselves of their UVA education to get to a point where they were, I guess, professionally entitled to file suit against the people who taught them how to file suits. And I don't know exactly what that's supposed to be. I mean, they got the education they were looking for, and what's the problem? I don't know. They're angry about something. They didn't get to call somebody a name, I guess, and be able to get away with it and feel good about themselves. Brown isn't the only DOJ official and UVA graduate who has called on Ryan to resign, according to the New York Times. Harmeet K. Dillon, the Justice Department's top anti-civil rights lawyer, let's make it right, has also been involved in negotiations with the university, the paper reported. Dylan is a 1993 graduate of the UVA Law School, where she sat on the editorial board of the Virginia Law Review. You can see they really held her down with all their prejudice there, right? Dylan and Brown join a chorus of voices calling for Ryan's resignation or removal, a campaign spearheaded by the Jefferson Council. I thought they figured they would just glom on and say, yeah, Jefferson would have wanted this. A conservative alumni group, the Jefferson Council, has on multiple occasions said Ryan's plans to dismantle DEI at UVA under the direct orders of the Trump administration were, quote, superficial at best. So, like, if you really want to make him into a hero, you say this was malicious compliance. And the basics of the story are the Trump administration, started screaming to anyone who would listen, every college everywhere has to get rid of DEI, and they better do it now. No DEI classes, no DEI programs. Just do it or we'll kill you or something. I don't know what. But that was kind of the sum total of the directive. And it was so vague and stupid that no one really knew what to do with it. So everybody started to say, well, we have, at the minimum, we have a Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And they're clearly mad about that. And we're worried about what they're doing at Harvard and Columbia, so maybe we want to avoid the same fate. Fine. Get rid of that department. But then they said, but we value what that department does. So they did. The accusation here is that UVA did this and that everybody else probably did it too. Well, we will change the name of our Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to something else that doesn't involve the dirty initials, and more or less continue to do what we do, which makes sense because DEI is not a bad thing. It's not scary or weird, and it is in fact supportive of all the same values that conservatives who say they hate DEI used to say, and probably still say, that they actually support meritocracy, et cetera. Well, okay, well, why don't we use our diversity, equity, and inclusion programs to reach out and make sure that people who could, in fact, demonstrate everything it takes to succeed in a meritocracy get the opportunity to prove that they can do that? What's the problem with that? And the basic and only answer to it is, then other people will be able to have those benefits instead of me. And I don't want that. And even worse, there are some people who are like, I don't even care whether I get it or someone else gets it. It's that I don't want people who aren't white to have it. And I don't know. This is the position of the supposed civil rights division at the DOJ. You can't call it that anymore. You can't say Harmeet Dillon is the top civil rights lawyer at the DOJ. She's not. She's the top opponent of civil rights at the DOJ. She's the anti-civil rights chief. Dillon and Brown are in on this as well. It's also amazing that they were held back by the prejudice so badly that now they're professionally credentialed to sue the university. Another group calling itself Wahoos, that's what their nickname is down there. Wahoos for UVA. And I mean, that's what Wahoos are for. They're the Wahoos. Of course, they're going to be for UVA. Except, interestingly, just like being the top civil rights attorney at the DOJ now, currently making you anti-civil rights, these Wahoos are not for UVA. They are Wahoos for suing UVA. But they're for it by trying to destroy it. Okay, sure. Well, let's see. I'm sorry. Okay, I got it wrong. Pardon me. Sorry, Wahoos for UVA. These are actual Wahoos for UVA. I thought this was going to be another group like the Jefferson Council. But this is the Jefferson Council's opposition here. Okay, well then, well named. Good job. I'm glad they're teaching somebody how to read down there. Not me. I didn't go to UVA. Another group calling itself Wahoos for UVA, comprising current and former students, parents, faculty, staff, and friends of the university, and I guess they really are friends, has come to Ryan's defense. Pardon me for making that strange assumption, but I thought, I don't know, the 4 in there, certainly, it's the number 4 made me think, I don't know, that it was some sort of weirdo conservative group. And then the introduction of them as another group. Okay, the coalition's stated goal, the Wahoos for UVA, who really are for it, is to spread the message that UVA is thriving thanks to Ryan. It collected roughly 4,000 signatures on a letter of confidence in Ryan's leadership. They should certainly express that confidence. I don't know if it's thriving because of Ryan, but, he's not doing it any harm, that's for sure. Ryan, who has served as UVA's 9th president since 2018, has not publicly responded to calls for his resignation or removal. UVA spokesman Brian Coy did not respond immediately to a daily progress inquiry Thursday night. That's just hilarious that his name is Coy. And he's not responding to requests for comment, even though he's the spokesman. What a coy guy. This guy's playing coy. In March, the university's governing board of visitors voted to dissolve the DEI office after the Trump administration threatened to withhold federal funding to schools that continued to support such programs. So they knuckled under, but later that same month, Bert Ellis, then a member of the board, told the Daily Progress that eliminating DEI at UVA meant everything, not just a single office or position. Boo, Bert, come on. Every aspect, absolutely every aspect of it, every aspect of every program, Ellis said at the time. Every aspect, really? Is it every aspect? Say it again, Bert. Of DEI is to be ripped out, shredded, and terminated. What a stable human being this sounds like. On April 28th, though, the DOJ sent a letter to UVA citing, quote, complaints that the school had failed to dismantle DEI as promised. The DOJ first set a deadline of May 2nd for UVA to comply, but that deadline was extended to May 30th. Taco. Which Coy said the school would meet when he spoke to the Daily Progress in early May. The latest push from DOJ officials makes it clear that UVA's response was not satisfactory to everyone. And by the way, here's a picture of Bert Ellis, and he's just what you're thinking. Anyway, one of the groups that lodged complaints against UVA has been identified as America First Legal. You may know them. An organization founded in 2021 to, quote, save the country from, quote, corrupt special interests, big tech titans. Uh-oh, too bad about that one. The fake news media and liberal Washington politicians. It's Stephen Miller's group. I don't know why it doesn't say that here. The group sent a letter to the DOJ on May 21st outlining how it claimed UVA was violating the law. It's not. But here's the claim. The university is operating programs based on race, sex, ethnicity, national origin, and other impermissible, immutable characteristics under the pretext of diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI. In open defiance of federal civil rights law, reads the letter. No, it's not. It's quite the opposite. Now, I know that's your opposite is your interpretation of civil rights law, but you haven't proven anything, certainly. And almost no one agrees with you about that, actually. The group suggested, and this is an outside PAC, essentially, says, there should be federal charges against the university and the president. The president must be forced to resign because of my wackadoodle, upside down, backwards, through the looking glass interpretation, quote unquote, of federal law. I'm not a lawyer, but we've hired some people who are terrible ones to work here at America First Legal. Okay, one example, they say, is the UVA Equity Center, which has since become the Center for Community Partnerships. The Equity Center was established in 2019, quote, to tangibly redress the relationship between the university and the surrounding community. After years of complaints, the university had ignored or outright hurt Black and low-income communities in surrounding Charlottesville. That's a criticism that has been leveled at them, and they sought to address it. Oh, no, we don't allow for that. And in Trump world, you don't. And in, precarious masculinity world, you don't. They accuse you of something, fight them. Don't actually work to try to alleviate the problem. Ryan was quoted by the University Communications Department at the time saying the Equity Center was an important step in remedying the university's relationship with the community. Others see it differently. UVA has not dismantled its DEI framework. It has merely rebranded it to evade legal scrutiny. What the law prohibits, UVA simply renamed. Megan Radshaw, counsel at America First Legal, one of the actual lawyers, said in a May 29th statement. It's not accurate, but she is at least probably a lawyer. I don't know. America First Legal did not immediately respond to a daily progress inquiry. The Trump administration has threatened to cut off federal funding to universities that do not dissolve their DEI apparatus. UVA doesn't keep a public record of the total number of university employees who work in DEI, and the only indicator dates back to a Board of Visitors meeting in June of 2023. At that meeting, Ryan noted that UVA employs 55 people who work primarily in DEI, dedicating at least 80% of their time to DEI initiatives. The president also said the UVA's DEI budget amounts to $5.8 million, with the vast majority of that sum paying the salaries of those 55 employees. UVA has still lost federal funding regardless of the threats over DEI. As of May, UVA has lost $83 million in federal grant funding due to unrelated cost cutting in Washington. So that is all of some interest. Now I feel like, to complete the background of it, there was more in the New York Times treatment of things. This article written by Michael Schmidt and Michael Bender, two Michaels putting their heads together on this one. Trump Justice Department pressuring University of Virginia president to resign. You know why. Schmidt and Bender, as they note in their introduction here with the byline, have been covering the Trump administration's clash with Harvard University and other schools for months. The Trump administration has privately demanded that the University of Virginia oust its president to help resolve a Justice Department investigation into the school's DEI efforts. They use the full words here, according to three people briefed on the matter. And already the framing is of interest here, right? The scalp they want is Ryan's, and they hint, though they don't guarantee, that they will consider the investigation of the school, which never should have started and shouldn't be termed an investigation. And telling people it's an investigation by the Civil Rights Division into practices at the school gives the wrong impression, because for 60 years, the reality of having a civil rights investigation of anything from the DOJ hinted that there was something that we traditionally understood as racism going on. But there isn't. This is Stephen Miller's weirdo, warped version of racism. If black people are supposed to be janitors and pick up my trash, it's racism to ask me not to litter. That's where Stephen Miller's head is at. You know, that's the infamous speech that he gave as a high schooler, ostensibly the topic of which was, I'm tired of janitors of any color telling me to pick up my trash. Don't we pay them to pick up trash? Why shouldn't, a very childish thing to say in general. But now we understand him a little bit better with the record that he's left behind. And what he's really upset about is, and the way he expands everything through hyperbole. Immigration is an invasion. Any disagreement with the Trump administration is insurrection. And so it is, in fact, racism to ask a white person to pick up their own trash. My race is not meant to do that, is his view. Your race is on this earth for that purpose. So it's not racism for me to believe that my race is for doing whatever they want and your race is here to pick up after them. The racism is to say, wait, that might not be true, or that makes no sense, or it's not fair whether it makes sense or not. And no, it's not like that. It's a philosophy that holds one race superior and another inferior. To quote from Bob Marley quoting Haile Selassie. Anyway, you may recognize that. The extraordinary condition of the Justice Department has put on the school demonstrates that President Trump's bid to shift the ideological tilt of the higher education system, which he views as hostile to conservatives, is more far-reaching than previously understood. And that definitely has to be a point that gets across here. The government's extensive pressure campaign has stripped billions of dollars from elite universities, including Harvard, and you can throw UVA in there. It's a story about UVA, which has been the target of investigations from at least 6 different federal agencies. Harvard, that is. But this is the first time the administration has pushed a university to remove its leader. And before, they just put their oligarchs to that work. Bill Ackman would be the person pushing for getting Claudine Gay to resign as president of Harvard. Things like that. All right. And that leads me to my next thought about the next story here. So one more note to self, but using oligarchs to do your work rather than doing it directly comes up in another story in the headlines today. From France, like the Coneheads. Anyway, Justice Department officials have told University of Virginia officials that hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding are at risk because of what the department says is the school's disregard for civil rights law. Wrong. Over its diversity practices, according to two of the people. The department officials have told the university that the president, James E. Ryan, has not dismantled the school's diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and has misrepresented the steps taken to work toward that goal, according to two people. In the hopes of ensuring that the funding is not stripped from the school, members of the school's oversight board, who were appointed by Governor Glenn Red Fleece Youngkin, a Republican, have been in discussions with the Justice Department to learn what could be done, according to a person briefed on the matter. And that is a problem and a mistake right from the get-go. But there are Republicans on the board, and I'm sure they thought, I'll talk to the White House and find out what we can do to make sure that we're in compliance and so the school isn't hurt. I'm all about the school here. But the truth is, you could comply all you want. They're going to hurt the school anyway, so you shouldn't go down this path. But he wouldn't do that to a fellow Republican. He would. He will. He can't wait to. As part of those discussions, the Justice Department said that Mr. Ryan must go, according to three people of the people. A spokesman for the department did not immediately return a request for comment. The demand to remove Ryan was made over the past month on several occasions by Gregory Brown, the Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Anti-Civil Rights, remember, to university officials and representatives, according to the three people briefed on the matter. Brown, a UVA grad who, as a private lawyer, sued the school, is taking a major role in the investigation, which, really is a conflict of interest and he should have nothing to do with it. He told the university representative as recently as this past week that Mr. Ryan needed to go in order for the process of resolving the investigation to begin, two of the people said. So you file, open an investigation, threaten somebody with it, and say, by the way, there's something you could put in this hand that would make me say, what is this in my hand over here, this investigation papers? We can make that go away if you resign. I sued you as a private lawyer. I got a settlement. I didn't get you out of office before, but now I'm going to use the power of the federal government, which has been loaned to me, to get rid of you anyway. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I feel like we got to continue on. It's not a terribly overlong article here in the New York Times, but I think it's filling in some gaps here too, that I think the Daily Progress piece, because they incorporated the New York Times piece by reference, figured were on background with us already, but they may not have been. So where were we? Harmeet Dillon. We're just reminding everybody that Greg Brown, who filed suit against the university, though he was an alum anyway. And of course, remember the damage that was done to his life and advancement in it by graduating from UVA. So he's suing them because he's a now practicing attorney in Charlottesville. And I guess he didn't get everything he wanted out of the lawsuit, so now he's going to use his power that we said again is on loan to him by virtue of his service in the civil rights and now anti-civil rights division to try and finish the job. And if he can't do it alone, there's always Harmeet Dillon, the Justice Department's top anti-civil rights lawyer, has also been involved in negotiations with the university. She received her law degree from UVA, where she was a student in the law school at the same time as Mr. Ryan. So they actually went to law school together right there at UVA and studied the same professors and everything and came out with opposite ideologies nonetheless. So there must obviously be a terrible, terrible problem going on. Imagine the level of manipulative propaganda that must be being taught at UVA in order for both Harmeet Dillon and Jim Ryan to have gone through the school and come out with very different philosophies and ideas about civil rights. How horrible. Something must be done. I don't know what bothers them. And she was on the law review too. It's not even one of those cases where somebody who got prevented, like over at, was it the Harvard Journal, was it the Harvard Law Review itself, where somebody was on the law review, but was like, well, I'm not the king of the law review, and I'm white, so what the F is going on here? I better sue somebody. Okay. The people briefed on the back and forth between the university and the Justice Department spoke on condition of anonymity because they didn't want to be identified discussing negotiations. They didn't want to get in trouble, okay? Everyone knows that's why you want to be anonymous these days. Mr. Ryan, hired in 2018 as the university's 9th president. Wait a second. All right. There's some phrasing for you. I was like, what? When we read over at the Daily Pro, how did they put it? They said Ryan has been the university's 9th president, and I guess they meant having been named president in 2018, he's been in there for the past, well, that's not a very long amount of time, 8 years, and he's the 9th president. But they made it sound like he's the university's 9th president since 2018. Like they can't hold on to presidents. They're quitting every 6 months. Is that what this? Why? How did they phrase that? I mean, I must have just read that wrong. Yeah, okay. Ryan, who has served as UVA's 9th president since 2018. No, it should have said Ryan, who has served as UVA's president since 2018. That's awkward too. But all right. Ryan was named UVA's 9th president in 2018. He is not the 9th president they've had in the past 8 years. Phew, I was a little worried about that one when I read it. Okay, that's just awkward phrasing. Clearly, I think that I don't care anything about UVA and who the president is, but it probably would have reached my eyes if, there was a new president every 6 months down there. Okay, so Ryan has leaned into issues. Ooh, that's heavy phrasing, leaned into. Issues like making the school more diverse, increasing the number of first-generation students, and encouraging students to do community service. Son of a bitch! When are they going to get rid of this effing monster? What? I mean, here's the thing you got to take away from this whole thing. Ryan has been working hard to make the school more diverse, increase the number of first-generation students, and encourage students to do community service. Result? The United States Department of Justice has opened a civil rights investigation into the school and threatens that if they don't fire their president, they're never going to be able to resolve this, and they're going to have to go ahead with their charges after all and bring civil rights charges against the University of Virginia. And everybody knows what that means. Civil rights charges from the Federal Department of Justice against the University of Virginia equals racism. Everybody knows it. No, it means nothing of the kind. But that's the leverage they're looking to use. You don't want UVA to be synonymous with civil rights violations, do you? Well, we're not. Well, we say you are, and we're the Department of Justice. Who are they going to believe? Well, I'm here to tell you need to believe UVA, I think. And that's just from critical reading of these two pieces. Nobody in either one of these newspapers is telling you what's actually going on here. They're giving you all the building blocks, but, I guess they're not allowed to say what's really going on. Wow. Anyway, the people briefed on the back and forth between the university and the Justice Department spoke on condition of anonymity. Why? They're afraid. Though they were like, well, this is supposed to be private. Well, sure. Mr. Ryan, hired in 2018 as the university's 9th president. Right. Oh, he's doing all these good things. So arrest him. But his approach, which he says will make the university both great and good, no one wants that, has rankled conservative alumni and Republican board members who accuse him of wanting to impose his values on students. Yeah, it's called education, my friend. And claim he is too woke. All right. Before becoming the University of Virginia's president, Mr. Ryan served as dean of, here's his problem, dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where he was praised for his commitment to DEI programs. Harvard has been one of the Trump administration's chief targets since it began its assault on higher education. The administration's attempt to assert federal influence over state university leadership, states' rights, and the decisions made there is also illustrative of how Mr. Trump's political appointees continue to wield the Justice Department's investigative powers to achieve policy goals long sought by a top Trump advisor, Stephen Miller. Legal experts said they could think of few other instances in which an administration had demanded that a school have its president removed in order to resolve a Justice Department investigation. This is a tactic you would expect the government to use when it's playing hardball in a criminal case involving a corporation accused of serious wrongdoing or pervasive criminal activity, said Daniel C. Richman, who is a law professor at Columbia University and a former federal prosecutor. What this really is, when it comes down to it, using it against a state university president, this is something you would have expected to see way back when, in the 60s, the DOJ and the Civil Rights Division saying the president of the University of Alabama is defying integration orders and needs to go. That's the stigma that the current DOJ hopes you'll take away from the headline about Ryan. But thank God somebody was willing to tell you the rest of the story. And I mean the reporters here. They did tell the rest of the story. I'm reading you the rest of the story. I didn't report this. I'm reading it. I'm telling you what else is missing in there. But I think these guys probably know that and wish they could put it in there, but just don't or can't. The administration never shared, by the way, a clear definition of diversity practices, which has led to a range of responses from universities, including the removal of DEI-related classes from graduation requirements and the end of long-running campus forums on race. But Mr. Ryan has been singled out by the Trump administration as his steps toward compliance have been criticized by conservative groups as insufficient. America First Legal, and here they tell you, a nonprofit started by Mr. Miller, last month accused the University of Virginia of paying lip service to Trump's orders by simply running the same diversity programs under a different name. Hero. The group issued a news release last month that called on the Justice Department to, quote, hold UVA accountable. And again here, you now have Stephen Miller's outside influence group having the advantage of being able to say, hey, go make that policy. And the guy who founded America First Legal can just auto pen whatever he wants into policy because the old man has no idea what's going on. Rebranding discrimination does not make it legal, and changing a label doesn't change the substance. That's Megan Redshaw, remember, from America First Legal. UVA's use of sanitized language and recycled job titles is a deliberate attempt to sidestep the law, except the law isn't on their side there. But, they say it is, and the Solicitor General will tell the SCOTUS that it is, and, 5 of them at least likely to believe that. The unusual targeting of a college president comes 1 month after the Justice Department lawyers used their power to force student editors at the Harvard Law Review, here, this is the story I was thinking of, a legal journal run independently of the university, to withdraw a letter of reprimand for a student who worked there. I think we told that story here. Following a similar strategy that Mr. Miller's America First Legal Group has tried against student-run legal journals at Northwestern and New York University, the Justice Department asserted that the Harvard Law Review was discriminating against white male authors. The student who had been reprimanded, Daniel Wasserman, was accused of what? It was not that he didn't get his stuff published, not that he didn't get a good job at the Harvard Law Review or afterwards. The issue was that Wasserman was accused of violating the Law Review's privacy policy by downloading copies of thousands of internal documents. The Justice Department said that Mr. Wasserman was a cooperating witness in its investigation of Harvard Law Review. Wasserman now works in the White House for Mr. Miller. The answer here is Mr. Miller belongs in irons. But, that could take us a while. But hey, if there's ever a Democratic president again who decides that the policy of only looking forward was actually a huge mistake, I hope you arrest Stephen Miller so hard. It's really going to be exciting to watch. But I guess, don't hold out any hope for it, quite honestly. Okay, so that has led me to a couple other stories that I wanted to include for you. And this one brought to my attention, like yesterday's reading of Jay Kuo's write-up of the various things that have been, I guess, suggested they will be jettisoned from the One Big Beautiful Reconciliation Bill. That was suggested to me by our pal and listener who we know because of the methodology used to contact me with this information. That is Daily Kos Mail as Daily Kos user SF Bay Transplant. And we likewise have another suggestion here, a pointer to a more localized story here in Loudoun County. And let me grab for you, I think this is a good transition story, from WTOP News. That's the local Washington, D.C. area, the biggest news radio operation in the capital area. This is an article that's, they, like The Guardian, label their stories when they're a little older. This article is about 2 months old, it says, but it's from late April of this year. What's going on? Loudoun County Schools Superintendent says no to signing anti-DEI certification. Very interesting for a number of reasons. Basically, he's taking the same position as Jim Ryan, the president of UVA. No, DEI is actually not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And it's the it's honestly the living soul of an education program at all. And I saw included in, the message that was sent to me was a link to a Facebook post by, if I recall correctly, I'll go and open it again, even though I hate opening Facebook. But it was, I clicked the wrong button here, a clip from maybe the Joy Reid show that, but I don't know the name of the reporter who's reporting here, and I don't know if it actually identifies him, but in the audio it does. But this is a report on what's going on in the Loudoun County case here. And this is a clip taken from the local NBC News affiliate and then used by Joy Reid on her Facebook page /show/ whatever it is she's up to doing these days. And I think I may have the Channel 4 NBC News report available right here. Maybe we can use it to play the audio of the superintendent explaining himself here. But here's the story. Loudoun County Schools Superintendent says no to signing anti-DEI certification. Kate Ryan is the reporter for WTOP covering this. Loudoun County, Virginia Schools Superintendent Aaron Spence. And he's new since the last guy got himself attacked by Chris Rufo and the various weirdos, including Governor Youngkin and the Listen to the Parents agenda and the anti-DEI movement. And you remember all the controversy that was going on in Loudoun County public schools, and there was transgender basis, anti-transgender basis to the fighting going on. And then, of course, there was COVID restrictions wrapped up in all of it. And it got, things boiled over, and Chris Rufo and Glenn Youngkin and Donald Trump and other Republicans used Loudoun County to try to leverage a national movement there. And the end result was that the coverage was of open fighting and even violence and removal from the premises by police of parents who were protesting what they said was the cover-up by the school board of sexual assaults that had taken place in the schools. And they were sexual assaults that had taken place in the schools. And there's a million different levels at which this thing could have been analyzed. But they tried very, very, very hard to try to turn this into this is a transgender related issue, that it was a transgender student assaulting some girl at random in the bathroom at one of these things, and that student was in there because they have a too woke policy of letting anybody use any kind of bathroom they want, and yada yada argle bargle, and litter boxes in the schools, and Portland, Oregon has been burned to the ground. All these kinds of, they're eating the cats and dogs. And as it turns out, 1, the student doesn't identify as transgender. 2, there was an arranged meeting with a girl who everybody knew as his girlfriend. And yes, he took terrible advantage of the situation, and the kid needs help and needs to be out of that school. True. But it wasn't the story that's not an interesting enough story for Chris Rufo to build a national profile on. So it had to become a transgender thing, and it went crazy from there. And as a result, most of the rest of the country was sort of, I guess if it was their introduction to Loudoun County, Virginia, then they would throw in things like, well, statistically speaking, it's one of the wealthiest counties per capita in the entire country. And so that plus this reactionary band of weirdos, plus actual concerned parents, plus the germ of truth somewhere in all of this complaining, came out. Not only were they able to leverage this into a, quote unquote education reform for Chris Rufo, but they were able to leverage this into making the rest of the country think Loudoun County was full of reactionary, rich, anti-trans jerks. And I was here to tell you, no, that's not what's going on here. And that's not supported by anything near a majority of the county. And in fact, Glenn Youngkin, in his race for governor, he was able to ride that to victory. And he campaigned all over the state saying, no, Loudoun County, Yargle Bargle. And Loudoun County said, up yours. And he lost by double digits here. And it's not where the rest of us are. And here's another example. So, Loudoun County School Superintendent says no to signing anti-DEI certification. And the new superintendent, Aaron Spence, after they fired the old superintendent because Yargle Bargle, has refused to sign off on forms that require schools to eliminate, quote, illegal diversity, equity, and inclusion curriculum or risk losing federal funding. Now, there is no illegality about diversity, equity, and inclusion, by the way. And that, too, is a huge problem. And when the Department of Justice says, we require you to remove this because it's illegal. First of all, they've skipped all the work of making it illegal and just declared it to be illegal. There's a legal process that you have to go through in order to declare something illegal. But they declared it illegal and then say, well, you're involved in illegality. Obviously, you're going to want to end that. Well, no, we're involved in something real and legitimate and true and necessary. And at the heart of it, you can't educate properly without it. You can't just declare that part of education that you don't like or weren't good at illegal and make everybody stop it just because you failed it. Anyway, in a letter to the community posted on the Loudoun County Schools website, Spence said that the U.S. Department of Education called on Virginia's Education Department to collect certification forms from all school districts by April 24th, but that he would not be doing that. In its February 14th Dear Colleague letter, Education Department, need my sound effects, Acting Assistant Secretary for, believe it or not, Civil Rights, but don't believe it because they're anti-civil rights, Craig Trainor, Trainor, in case you want to find more about him. Craig Trainor wrote that some programs in schools discriminate in, quote, insidious ways. DEI programs, the letter continued, frequently preference certain racial groups and teach students that certain racial groups bear unique moral burdens that others do not. No. Spence said that the refusal to sign off on the certification being collected by the Virginia Department of Education is not political or ideological. The refusal is not. Interesting. We're not putting ourselves out to intentionally poke somebody in the eye, he said. Spence said the problem is that the direction to school systems were vague and overly broad. And by the way, that's also very often used as a legal term of art in striking down regulations that, even if they're not necessarily rising to the level of arbitrary and capricious, when your directives are vague and overly broad, that's another huge problem because no one knows what to do with them. They say things like illegal DEI practices, but they don't define what they view to be illegal, he said. And this too is vibes, essentially. The conservative movement has always run largely on vibes. even though they probably don't recognize it or know what they are and think, oh, that's woke stuff vibes. But, they run on, well, that ought to be illegal. And there ought to be a law against that. Well, there's a process for making a law against it, and it's very onerous and difficult. Well, then screw it. Let's not do it. Let's just declare things to be illegal. And you can't just say, oh, I'm conservative and I don't like it, so it's illegal. But that's actually been sort of the Republican platform since forever. If it isn't illegal, it ought to be. And quite honestly, if we're in the DOJ, let's just say it's illegal and charge people. And if they go to court and win because you got it one of those judges that's like, no, actually, in order for it to be a law, it has to be written down and passed by Congress. Well, then we'll just impeach that judge. But you can't do things. This is not, words are supposed to matter. And that's what they say about their DEI thing. You're making white people feel bad with your words. And anyway, that's illegal. It's not. But that's also not what's happening. So neither of us have a problem. Bye. All right. So, they're vague and overly broad. They say things like illegal DEI practices, but they don't define it. We teach an African American Studies course in Loudoun County that's approved by the Virginia Department of Education, by the way. But we're not clear on whether or not the federal department would view that as an illegal DEI practice, because there's nothing from the guidance from the feds. They're just like, well, don't do illegal stuff. Well, what's illegal? I don't know. I know it when I see it. Vibes. We comply with federal and state law when it comes to non-discrimination, but we're not going to put ourselves in a position of agreeing with something that we don't even know what we're agreeing to, he said. Spence said the school system applies for federal grants each year. There's a grant application packet that we submit to our school board. Our school board approves it, and then we send it to the federal government through the Virginia Department of Education. And we certify when we sign off on that grant application that we do not discriminate on the basis of race, national origin, gender, or other protected classes, he said. And he's telling the truth. One, yes, he does sign that. And two, he's telling the truth about whether or not they're discriminating on the basis of race, national origin, gender, or other protected classes. The problem is that Stephen Miller says that unless you're discriminating on the basis of race in favor of white people, you are discriminating on the basis of race. You can't discriminate on the basis of race to the benefit of someone non-white. That's illegal. But you also should be illegal, in his view, to not privilege white people by eliminating history that makes them feel uncomfortable or might. Even when it's not making them feel uncomfortable, well, it might. So let's get rid of it. And it's illegal not to get rid of it. Those are in effect throughout the grant cycle. So that's essentially a continuous certification that we comply with all laws related to non-discrimination, he added. Chris Countryman, the president of the Loudoun Education Association, the union representing all the county educators, said she supports Spence's decision, calling DEI programs a vital tool in making sure that our public schools provide the kind of opportunities that every student deserves. That's the truth of the DEI program. But like CRT, and that's where this all started, right? They had another acronym or another set of initials in the alphabet soup of things they cried about when Chris Rufo was drumming all this nonsense up about, well, the attack in the bathroom and trying to make it a transgender issue. He was also saying, it's so trans that it's CRT. What? That makes no sense. But CRT was a hot topic, so he decided to try to latch onto it. CRT fell by the wayside. Eventually, they convinced everybody, CRT is just not a thing that gets taught in secondary schools or any schools beneath the graduate level, really, even. But so that kind of worked eventually. So they were like, well, DEI, that happens everywhere. So we're definitely against that. That DEI is CRT. If you were already mad about CRT, be mad about DEI because it's got letters in it. So, all right. Spence said, many teachers are fearful about coming into conflict with the federal education directive by teaching examples of systemic racism, such as the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II or redlining practices in the 20th century. He said they'd need more guidance on what would and would not be allowed in order to comply with what's in the certification letter. So all he's saying here is, I'm not signing this letter the claim is I'm not signing this letter because I'm a hero on behalf of DEI necessarily. His claim is I'm not signing this letter because this letter doesn't make any sense and I don't know how to comply with this letter, so I certainly shouldn't be signing it. That's actually a good legal stance to take. But also, I think deep down and underneath, and this is probably his problem, is that Chris Rufo and Stephen Miller think that he's really not signing it because he actually likes DEI. But also, that's not a problem. That's actually a good thing. No, it's illegal to like DEI. It is not. It shouldn't be. You guys should probably be in jail for various other things. It's not a crime to say I don't like DEI, but auto pen signing bombing attack orders probably would be. Let's look into that. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We got one more segment left to go here. I'm trying to set up, in case I get the chance to play the superintendent's comments here that he made to NBC News. But in order to do that, of course, there's pre-roll ads, and they have to sit there. And I'm stuck through a full 30-second one with no skip, obviously available. So let's see. Let's boycott this company for inconveniencing me. I don't even know what. So far, they haven't even put the name of the company up here yet. So it's just all right. It's T-Mobile. Screw you, T-Mobile. We hate your guts. I don't know. Anyway, it took them a full 30 seconds to let me get through this thing. And all right, now I gotta pause the report and bring it back, etc. Okay, so I think I might be able to play this video. The other thing is, the video that I saw on Facebook is on Reels on Facebook, and I don't know if I just don't understand the interface of Reels, but it seems to me that you open one of these things up and it's kindly muted to begin with, which is nice, but then the video begins, and then there's no obvious controls. The pause button, you can pause things by clicking in the middle of the video where the pause and play button would ordinarily appear, and seems to work, but there's no rewind, and so you always end up missing the first couple of seconds. I do anyway, when I'm looking around trying to find the buttons to pause the thing. Anyway, okay, so there's more in the WTOP report here, but we're getting down to the end of it. But this is a pretty good explanation of the technical reasons why the superintendent was worried about signing this thing. What you're asking me to sign, what I guess purports to be some kind of a legal document. What am I committing to? No one can tell me. I can't sign that. Everybody else signed it. That's a mistake on their part. But yeah, I don't know what I'm committing to. I want some clarification. Spence said he was not sure whether, and have I done all this? Yeah, I think so. Spence said he was not sure whether there were other school districts in Virginia that had declined to sign the certification, but as far as he knew, he was the only superintendent in Northern Virginia who did not sign off on it. We stay focused on doing the right thing all the time, and we stay focused on doing what's right for kids, he said. I like the statement. We have 82,000 students, 82,000 beautiful, beautiful, diverse, wonderful kids. So that's where the Loudoun County schools supervisor stands on all of this. And I guess, well, no listeners to this show, I don't think anymore, are still out there saying, nah, I actually stick with the first impression I got of Loudoun County. It's full of rich, reactionary, anti-trans jerks. Not the case, and it's not the case in officialdom either. And this guy was just recently hired for this job. Who would be hiring him? The school board, yes, but also the county board of supervisors. The elected officials representing the people of Loudoun County are not anywhere near aligning themselves with the Rufos, Millers, and Youngkins, and Trumps, naturally, of the world. Are there Trump voters out here? Yeah, sure, absolutely. Are they crazy enough to believe that this would be a good thing? Yeah, sure. Are they few enough in number that they're regularly trounced at the polls? Yes, absolutely. And isn't it true, though? Isn't it true? Wouldn't you say that there's something to the fact that Trump's infamous Virginia, which he keeps saying is Washington, D.C., golf course is located in Loudoun County, Virginia? I'd have to admit that was true, but it doesn't seem to have any interesting effects on the way things. It's some of the strongest anti-Trump and anti-Rufo Miller type propaganda voting going on in the county is happening in the environs of the golf course and nearby. And don't forget that on the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, the supervisor representing the district in which the golf course itself lies is the famous Julie Briskman, who you all came to know as the woman caught on camera biking past Trump's motorcade in his first administration and flipping him the bird and then getting fired for doing it. And now is the elected official representing that district. So that plus, of course, my insistence on repeating over and over again the election results for Youngkin's general election, in which he lost the precincts in which the two schools involved in the controversy earlier named in Loudoun County Public Schools were located. So even among the voting population of the schools where those attacks happened, there was not majority support for Youngkin and the Youngkin-Rufo Miller agenda. So, okay. So I mentioned to you that NBC4, the local NBC affiliate, had stories on this. And this, too, happened right around the same time, around late April. Loudoun school superintendent tells why district won't sign anti-DEI certification. But this one involves a long-ish interview with the superintendent himself, which may or may not be the same video that Joy Reid was using from NBC, set up by the reporter. But let me see if I can't run some of this setup for you, just so you can hear the superintendent's own words eventually.
A major school district defying a state and federal deadline from the U.S. Department of Education, potentially risking the loss of crucial federal funding. Thanks for joining us, everybody, for the News 4 Rundown on this Thursday, April 24th. I'm Jim Handley.
There you are. So it's Jim Handley, the anchor. And like I said, he told you what date it happened. It's been a while. But let's see. At what point did they get around to actually playing the words of the superintendent? Well, we'll play a little bit more and
President Trump's
see what we
efforts
can do
to exert control over American education just hit a major roadblock. Today, a federal judge blocked President Trump's push to cut funding to public schools over diversity programs.
Important point.
The Trump administration directives threaten to cut federal funding for schools with programs in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the Education Department has ordered states to certify their school systems are in compliance. A lawsuit argues the orders are unconstitutionally vague.
Isn't that the point that Spence himself was making? And in fact, isn't that the point that President Ryan of UVA has been making about this? Well, as it turns out, the federal courts so far agree, and yet we're back in this news cycle currently with the Department of Justice having been handed a ruling from federal courts saying the opposite, now says UVA must comply with our demands that are dependent on our interpretation, which was wrong, of federal law and its requirements with regard to DEI.
And violate teachers' First Amendment rights to free speech. Today, a federal judge in New Hampshire agreed and blocked the directives. But soon after that judge's ruling, the superintendent of Loudoun County Schools sent a letter to families calling the demands from the Department of Education vague and overly broad.
I guess
saying
they were.
In part, we cannot and should not be asked to certify we are not engaged in behaviors that have been clearly defined.
Well, that have not been clearly defined. Unfortunately, you skipped that word, but okay.
Depending on how this plays out in the courts, the move...
The actual quote from the letter was up on the screen as he was reading it, so you can see that he just misses that word. It's not just my assumption.
Could put Loudoun County Schools at risk of losing federal money. The News 4 I-Team's Ted Oberg spoke with the superintendent today about this decision. He joins us now with what he had to say.
Okay, and I think this must be the video that I got via Facebook from SF Bay Transplant from the Joy Reid show. And I'm glad that they've identified the reporter here. I've already forgot. Oh, here it is. Ted Oberg. All right, just so I credit him properly. Ted Oberg does the rest of this report. Thanks. Take it away, Ted. Or take it far away.
Yeah, Jim, he said he did this letter not necessarily to stick his neck out, but to try and get some clarity. And we want to add some context around all of this. Earlier this month, the U.S. Department of Education asked every state and local education agency that receives federal funding to certify it doesn't engage in discrimination on the grounds of race, color, or national origin.
Well, that seems easy enough to do because they don't.
Virginia asked...
Or at least Loudoun County. I can say I believe the superintendent when he says it is their intention not to engage in that and that they try their best not to. No one knows 100%, but it's clearly not a racist school board here.
Every single school district in the state to sign it on their own. Loudoun County today says they won't sign it and went to some length to explain why. Firstly, Loudoun County says they and every school district that receives federal funding, which is almost all of them, certify this every year, and they've already done it this year. The district said it's not clear what the...
Oh, that's interesting. That could be a case you can take to, or used to be able to take to DOGE, right? I'm sure that they would stand up on principle, right? This is duplicative, repetitive paperwork. How stupid is this? Just to streamline government operations, couldn't we at least say, hey, I've already signed a document that says that we don't engage in this kind of discrimination when we submitted our federal grant package. Just use that. Ask Big Balls to transfer that over. Oh, and by the way, we reported yesterday the reported departure of Big Balls from the federal government is apparently premature. Though for whatever reason, the White House website said, yeah, he's out. He, in fact, isn't, and he's still on the payroll somewhere. But I can include a link to you for that for you later. Let's get on with this here.
Purpose of this new certification serves. It went further, pointing out the federal certification asks school districts not to engage in certain DEI practices and illegal DEI, but didn't define what those terms are. This afternoon, the Loudoun County superintendent told us he worries it is so vague that things like an African American history class or a celebration of Black History Month could be a violation of this order without even knowing it.
It opened the door for interpretation and, for any of the activities in which we engage in.
And that's Aaron Spence speaking here, the superintendent of schools.
I don't understand how anybody can get an education if we pretend that we are not a diverse group of people without different lived experiences and try to understand how we can bring those wonderful and beautiful perspectives into our classrooms to learn and grow together.
Dr. Spence insists the decision in Loudoun County was not a political or ideological one, but one made seeking clarity and maybe the start of a conversation with the U.S. Education Department. Maryland, by the way, handled this decision on a statewide basis and today told News 4 all districts have signed an alternative certification to the Department of Ed, which protects students' civil rights while recognizing their individual characteristics. D.C. officials tell us. They have signed the Department of Education certification.
The D.C. officials will be under a different set of circumstances. They don't have a state government to stand between them and the federal government, and of course they are in the home district of the federal government. And Congress very frequently, especially when it's under Republican control, frequently will try and assert direct governing authority over D.C. and not allow for home rule at all. So they are definitely under the gun. All right, and that's actually the conclusion of the piece here. Let's see if I got to make sure that, unfortunately. All right, there we go. There's our pause button so I can get rid of that ad. And that's it. So actually that was a shorter clip. Let's see if I can play the Facebook one that I got sent here. And this is the same reporter here. And I guess maybe is he filing a different and updated report? And unfortunately, we'll have missed the first couple seconds of what's going on here. But let's see. He writes, or the screen tells us, the LCPS superintendent states support for DEI. We're about to find out what happens. When? What
happens when a local school district tells the U.S. Department of Education no? Doesn't happen very often these days, and it's over a signature issue. The U.S. Department of Education.
I can only mute it or turn it all the way up. That's really helpful as well. All right. Well, that doesn't seem to be. It's not optimal. Let's say that. Can I change the volume with my controllers here? Let's say Firefox. Yeah. Supposing we turn that down just a little bit. Oh, now I'm going to lose those settings. But all right. We can't blow our ears out here. All right. Let's see if I can play it.
They've asked all school districts to sign this certification, saying they wouldn't engage in discrimination or certain or illegal DEI, but they didn't necessarily define what that was. If districts didn't sign it, by the way, they could have lost their federal funding. Well, Loudoun County in Virginia said, no, we're not signing it. This is too vague, and we don't know what we're agreeing to.
Okay, we've heard that.
In an interview with the superintendent, he talked to us about why it's so important in his belief that they recognize diversity, equity, and inclusion in their classrooms.
I mean, diversity is our reality, right? So if you think about who we are in Loudoun County, we're an incredibly diverse school division. We have people from all walks of life with all kinds of interesting backgrounds who bring unique perspectives into our classrooms, a vast variety of different lived experiences, and diversity is a strength for us. We leverage those different and diverse perspectives to grow and learn together. When you think about equity are the outcomes that we're interested in. We're wanting to understand, do all of our students, regardless of zip code, regardless of how much money their parents make, regardless of skin color, have the same kinds of opportunities to thrive and succeed in our schools? Our goal in terms of equity is to make sure that every single child is successful, and that is inherently the goal of public education. And when you think about inclusion is the tool that we accomplish that with. So, this is our existence and our fundamental reality in schools. We work towards inclusive practices and celebrate our diversity as a strength.
Courts, by the way, have also.
That's a pretty remarkable and full-throated statement about not only why you would not sign a letter like this, but about why DEI is a good thing, not a bad thing, and you should just ignore you can't just ignore the propaganda, but I wish everybody would, but a good explanation for what's wrong with this idea, this broadside against DEI, and he lays it out pretty importantly. Look, the diversity is a reality. The equity is the outcome that all public education ought to have, and even Republicans and conservatives and MAGA wackadoodles are supposed to want to recognize that, and sometimes even give lip service to the idea. We do want it to have equitable outcomes, and inclusion is the tool by which you ensure that you can approach the goal of equity. None of these things can be excluded, and certainly it's a ridiculous thing to say, well, I don't want you, first of all, DEI should be illegal, and it isn't, but we're going to say it is, which, ironically, since I closed the last segment by saying, well, Chris Rufo, Stephen Miller ought to be in jail. Well, that's the same thing that I just said that Republicans are always engaging in, and they're making it policy. So I said, well, we'll switch directions and we'll put him in jail for something we can put him in jail for. But Chris Rufo probably wasn't involved in that. But anyway, what can I tell you? They get people wound up. But I thought that was a very good explanation, lengthy, but a good explanation. And our reporter here Ted Oberg continues at some length, although it won't tell me how much longer he goes. But he does point out, as he said, courts, by the way, actually kind of agree that this is too vague and too stupid to implement.
Said no to the Department of Education's putting a pause, at least for now, on any effort to punish districts who wouldn't sign this letter. I think it's clear that we likely haven't seen the last chapter.
I think that's likely true.
If you like what
Sorry,
you've seen,
Ted.
hit the like button.
Yeah, hit that like button. It's a good excuse, by the way, to bring me back to another topic that I need to tell you to hit the like button once again. Scott tells you every once in a while during the breaks that we put into the podcast. I really need to make more of an effort. It's very much against my nature in general, mostly because everybody hates. I thought everybody hated it when you look on YouTube or in this case Reels or anywhere else, and somebody tells you something, interesting, and then interrupts all the interesting stuff to say, remember, smash that like button, subscribe so you don't miss any of my new videos. But apparently that's kind of what controls the algorithm and makes you more discoverable to others. And the more discoverable we are to others, I assume that we'll also draw some attacks as well. But what I'm hopeful for is that we'll attract the attention of others so that I don't have to keep going back to you who are already listening and supporting the show and saying, you should support us even more. Which you should, don't get me wrong, but there would be less pressure on you to do that if there were other people joining us and saying, actually, I kind of like this show and would like to support it. Okay, that takes us a little bit away from our message. I did say that there was one other linked story that I want to get to, and now I have to back up and re-explain what that is. Anyway, great, I thought. Thank you very much for pointing the story out to us, our SF Bay transplant pal, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you recognize that there was a local angle to it. But Aaron Spence, Superintendent of Schools, doing a great job making the case and making sure that you understand that even if you're not in ideological agreement with the understanding that he holds of what DEI is and why it's important, you still can't sign on to this letter. How can you certify that you're not going to do something when you don't even know what that something is supposed to be? And there's a changing and an ever-changing, ever-shifting goalpost moving type definition to the program. You're walking into a trap. Signing an agreement with this administration on anything is walking into a trap. Signing an agreement with its Department of Justice, we agree ahead of time to your definition of what illegality is, knowing that definition is dumb, vague, and overly broad, and stupid, and likely to be. It is already declared as a goal, an outright goal of this administration, to change the rules such that you can rug pull against people you don't like in blue areas, or where people do things that we don't like, where we should throw them in jail, like I said. It's working, even on me. But all right. Well, anyway, the linked story I was going to bring you, you wouldn't think it was linked if you didn't know that I will link anything. This one comes from Politico, boo, but Politico Europe. Still boo, I guess. But here's a shocking little story, I guess, that probably would surprise you. I want to read this one to you because it's out of the ordinary, to say the least, but I got to click a couple of things in order to let Politico EU tell me. They're only going to show me the story if I could verify for them that I'm a human. I don't know who else they'd be showing it to, but, Okay. But I mentioned earlier that, why did I mention it, though? Oh, yes, right. Bill Ackman and his attacks on Claudine Gay and leading the fight to oust her from Harvard University. And I had said that at least in that case, the administration had leaned on its oligarchs, its oligarchic allies, its allies among the oligarchy, to do the dirty work for them. I need you to take the private case to private university, Harvard University, to pressure them to get rid of Claudine Gay. I want you to do that. You take it on. It'd be improper for the federal government to take it on squarely. But there are other places where we can attack Harvard University, and it's all of a piece. And to the extent we can attack them, if she refuses to resign, we can use it as leverage to make her resign. We'll stop attacking your grants, or at least some of them. It's a lie. We'll continue. If you get rid of your president. But if we get rid of the president first, then we can turn our full attention to attacking them on the grants. But again, the point was that they had Bill Ackman do that dirty work chiefly. Not that Chris Rufo and Stephen Miller didn't chime in. But there's another area where, again, the oligarchs, like if Putin is the model, Putin very frequently at least has the decency to have his oligarchs use private resources to do his dirty work. I mean, he reimburses them from out of the federal coffers, not federal, the national taxpayer coffers, to the extent that there's any analogy to that over in Russia. But here we're now crossing that line. Here's what we mean. Politico reports, in this case, in the person of Eric Bazal-Emil. If I've got that right, I'm going to have to spell that for you. But Eric's first name is spelled the way you think, with a C. Bazal hyphen EIMIL. So kind of Emil, but Bazal-Emil is my best guess here. It's Politico Europe, everybody. The story, that's the important part. U.S. State Department advisor wanted to boost French far-right leader Marine Le Pen. Well, okay. I mean, not okay, but okay. A State Department advisor, a private individual who happens to be an advisor or a paid person, what? We don't know. We'll find out in a minute. Wanted to boost Le Pen. Well, as a private idiot, that is your right. But of course, the story doesn't stop there. They wanted to make it public idiocy. How so? Samuel Sampson is this person's name, which is a joke to begin with. Samuel Sampson, a political appointee, so I guess he's more than an advisor. He holds some official role here, made the explosive recommendation as Le Pen eyes the presidency in 2027. Don't forget that. Two State Department officials tell Politico. All right, I better get to it. A firebrand. Ooh, a firebrand. You mean like Oliver North firebrand? That kind of firebrand? A firebrand State Department political appointee proposed using, and here's the key to it, and yet it's not in any of the headline language, proposed using American taxpayer money to support French far-right leader Marine Le Pen as she appeals her embezzlement conviction, according to two State Department officials. Now, this wackadoodle supports Nazis, problem, and shouldn't be in public service. But if he's saying, I'll give money to Marine Le Pen to defend herself, that's one thing. I'll take your money to give to Marine Le Pen to defend herself? No. U.S. President Donald Trump and his allies have joined far-right politicians in Europe in condemning Le Pen's conviction in March as politically motivated. You can't convict a true conservative. That's not a possibility. If it happens, it was politically motivated. Le Pen, one of Europe's most recognizable anti-immigrant Eurosceptics, has turned her party into a mainstream political force over the past decade and was polling as the frontrunner for France's 2027 presidential election before her guilty verdict. Womp womp. What can I tell you? He got convicted of embezzlement, and to the extent that French people don't want an embezzler as their president, what are you going to do? The two officials, who were granted anonymity because, let's face it, they would be thrown in jail if they were found out, said a senior advisor with the State Department's Bureau of Democracy, which, again, no, just as the people who are attacking UVA are not the leaders of the Civil Rights Division, they are the leaders of the Anti-Civil Rights Division. This person is not the leader of the Bureau of Democracy. They stole the office and the trappings and granted it to somebody who opposes all of those functions. But all right, senior advisor within the State Department's Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, named Samuel Sampson, made the initial funding recommendation this week after meeting with the leadership of Le Pen's party, the National Rally, late last month. Wow. Okay, and I'm running out of time, so I better get to the rest of it. Reuters was the first to report conversations between Sampson and a national rally leadership. While no decision has been made on the recommendation, using funds allocated to promote human rights and combat authoritarian regimes to back the leader of an opposition party, especially one whose founders included Nazi collaborators, would be explosive, potentially undermining the nearly 250-year alliance between France and the United States. In other words, what you're seeing here is help, police, foreign election intervention. Foreign election interference. Somebody do something about this. Oh, it's us? Well, we've always reserved the right to ourselves to do that to others, but usually not to France, and certainly not in pursuit of putting a Nazi in charge of France. We actually fought a war to prevent that at one point, and it was one of the most important strategic plans ever accomplished by the U.S. military, despite the fact that Pete Hegseth just the other day said actually the bombing that didn't actually end up working, the bombing of Iran the other day, was in fact the most complex and secretive such operation. Oh, I'm way behind on getting the hell out of here. Oh, and the music is way turned down here too because of the adjustments we had to make before. But let's boost things back up to the levels where we usually have them, where I'll tell you, I now can't get through the rest of the Politico story, but I wanted to at least get on the record. Yeah, there's a weirdo, and his name is Samuel Sampson, and he's looking to divert American taxpayer money to pay Marine Le Pen's legal bills so she can beat her embezzlement rap and run for president in 2027. Election interference? Yes, absolutely. Is it exactly the kind of election interference Putin likes to engage in? Yeah. I mean, it's really very similar and very close. But what I was going to say, the connection here is I think that it is the case that at least Putin has the decency to say, if we're going to do something like that, it's not going to be Russian official government money doing it. Except, well, I guess to some extent some of the hacking was being done by the military intelligence. But he puts the oligarchs in charge of running things like the, the Internet Research Agency that did most of that influencing of social media, right? He had the decency to have outside money doing it. Donald Trump, however, doesn't want to part with any of the outside money. He wants the government to pay for it.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
And of course, it's ridiculous to say that Vladimir Putin has decency of any kind, naturally. Anyway, it's time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy and his take on what you need to know heading into the weekend. And I guess what? It's a little bit different than what I had. So stay tuned. We'll see you next week.